Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. We're really thrilled to have you joining us today.
Absolutely. And looking at this stack of homeopathic psychology texts you sent over.
Oh man, it is an incredibly nuanced framework for personality typing.
It really is.
For those of you who study this field, you already know that constitutional prescribing is a fascinating lens through which to view human behavior.
Right, because it operates on the premise that a person's physical, mental, and emotional symptoms are all intertwined.
Exactly. They map holistically to specific archetypes, and our mission today is to unpack one very specific, highly complex profile detailed in your notes.
The Lycopodium archetype.
Yes, the Lycopodium.
Which is a profound look into the mechanics of human defense mechanisms. I mean, we aren't just categorizing people here.
No, not at all.
We are examining the architecture of the invisible armor we all wear as adults. And the Lycopodium provides a perfect study of how early childhood environments shape that armor.
And it's prevalent, right?
Very. About 1/5 of men in civilized societies fit into this type.
Wow, 1/5.
Which means, as we dissect these traits, you are almost guaranteed to recognize someone in your own life.
Or maybe even reflect on a few of these tendencies within yourself.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the core contradiction of the Lycopodium is what drives the entire profile.
That tension between the outside and the inside.
Right. On the surface, the classic Lycopodium often projects immense confidence. They're ambitious, they tend to be successful professionals.
Very driven.
Yeah, and they can even present as highly domineering or boastful. But that entire outward persona is a meticulously constructed shield.
The facade.
Underneath it all, they are driven by a secret, terrifying sense of powerlessness and just this constant lingering expectation of failure.
And the primary keynote for the Lycopodium, the absolute defining characteristic in the text, is impotence.
Which we should clarify.
Yes, we need to clarify that this extends far beyond the physical definition.
Right, it's not just physical.
We are looking at a pervasive psychological sense of lacking in power. It's a fundamental absence of faith in their own abilities.
A Lycopodium individual could be a CEO or a highly decorated academic.
And yet, internally, they feel entirely inadequate.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
And that level of persistent insecurity doesn't just spontaneously generate in adulthood.
No, it always traces back to childhood conditioning. There are two very distinct family dynamics that create this specific brand of insecurity.
And I'm really curious about the mechanics of the first one. The highly critical parent, which the notes say is usually the father.
Yes.
How does a parent's demand for perfection actually rewire a child's confidence so permanently?
What's fascinating here is how the child processes conditional love.
Okay.
When a parent demands absolute perfection, the baseline for acceptance becomes impossibly high.
Right. So if the child scores a goal in a game,
The father might immediately point out how he scored 2 when he was that age, or critique the child's form. The child learns very early on that love and approval are not inherent. They have to be earned through flawless performance.
consequently, a deep dread of failure takes root.
Because failure doesn't just mean losing a game, it means losing parental affection.
That makes the second scenario even more insidious to me. The notes refer to it as psychic osmosis.
Psychic osmosis, yes.
In this dynamic, the parent of the same sex is actually very unconfident themselves.
Which is a completely different vibe.
Right. The child might receive plenty of verbal encouragement, but they absorb the parent's deep-seated lack of confidence by example.
It's like emotional contagion.
Yeah, where the child just soaks up the ambient anxiety in the household.
That is an excellent way to frame it. Children are incredibly perceptive to nonverbal cues.
They notice everything.
They really do. If a father tells his son he can achieve anything, but the son watches that same father shrink away from challenges
Second guesses decisions.
and radiate a nagging fear of failure, the child will internalize the behavior, not the words.
And the result of either of these childhood scenarios is an adult carrying around a monumental fear of dropping the ball.
Which translates into what the case studies call anticipatory anxiety.
I want to linger on this because it is such a visceral physical response.
It's intense.
A Lycopodium individual lives with a constant hum of fear in the background. If they have an interview, a presentation, or any kind of public performance looming, they are physically sick with worry.
A queasy, churning stomach.
Exactly. And they are utterly convinced they're going to make a massive mistake.
And they endure that physiological fight-or-flight response even when there is no actual threat.
Right. The cortisol is flooding their system over a spreadsheet or a speech.
Yet, the irony is that they usually perform perfectly well.
Because they're heavily prepared.
Exactly. They succeed because they over-prepare.
Yeah.
But their anxiety is anchored to that childhood no-win situation.
It's entirely disconnected from their actual proven adult capabilities.
So, to cope with that unbearable internal pressure, the Lycopodium develops a mask.
And the subtypes, detailed in your notes, break these masks down into some very distinct survival strategies.
The first one is categorized as the wimp.
The wimp. This is the Lycopodium whose nervousness is completely undisguised.
They haven't developed the sophisticated defense mechanisms we see in the others.
Their anxiety is crippling. They are terrified of taking on anything new and constantly dread the presence of new people.
They react to adversity with pure fear rather than anger or strategy.
There is a memorable case study in the text about a man who was so terrified during a job interview.
Oh, the coffee incident.
Yes, he physically spilled his coffee all over the prospective boss's desk.
I found that example so revealing.
It almost seems like an unconscious sabotage.
Completely.
If you spill the coffee, the interview is ruined, the test is over, and you can escape the room.
You avoid the battle entirely.
But then we see the complete opposite reaction to that exact same inner sense of impotency, the strutter.
Ah, the strutter.
Instead of shrinking, the strutter counteracts his feelings of weakness by massively exaggerating his masculine power.
They physically and behaviorally inflate themselves to hide how small they feel on the inside.
You see this in the individual who gets aggressively into bodybuilding or martial arts.
It manifests as chauvinism, where they boast constantly about their conquests.
They overvalue everything stereotypically masculine and devalue anything feminine.
Exactly.
But wait, if the core wound of the Lycopodium is a terror of failing or being exposed as weak, how does becoming a chauvinist or a bully make sense?
It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, wouldn't actively starting conflicts or trying to dominate people put them at a much greater risk of losing and being exposed?
That is the paradox of the strutter, and it comes down to target selection.
Target selection.
They don't pick fair fights. They dominate timid people and bully their partners because it is a rigged game where they know they will win.
Wow.
The moment they come up against someone with genuine intellect or true, undeniable power, their demeanor changes entirely.
They back down.
They become incredibly respectful and deferential because they recognize they cannot compete.
So the bullying is merely a controlled test of power to reassure themselves of their own strength.
Exactly that.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the physical bullying is just one form of inflation. We also have to look at the intellectual strutter.
The intellectual smokescreen.
Yes. This type isn't necessarily a genius, but they desperately need everyone around them to believe they are.
They use pompous, excessively elaborate language to make relatively simple points.
They prefer $10 words when a $1 word would suffice.
Because by using grandiloquence, they create a barrier.
Right.
It is much harder for someone to question your foundational knowledge if they are busy trying to decipher your vocabulary.
They deliver these supposed pearls of wisdom with extreme gravity.
And they are completely intolerant of contradiction.
Oh, they will insert themselves into conversations between strangers just to correct a statement they perceive as inaccurate.
There is a brilliant case study mentioned about a patient who claimed to be studying chaos theory.
I loved this one.
He spoke about it with immense gravity, detailing how he was observing order arising out of chaos in human systems.
But as the consultation went on, it became clear the man had absolutely no background in physics or mathematics.
None at all.
He had picked up a trendy book because the title sounded impressive, using it as an intellectual facade to look smart and attract women.
It reminds me of the character Colonel Mainwaring from the British comedy Dad's Army.
Yes. Maximum petty authority covering up deep incompetence.
It highlights how exhausting it must be to maintain that facade.
Totally exhausting.
If you don't feel strong enough to fight physically, and you secretly fear you aren't smart enough to outwit everyone, there's a third mask you can wear to feel secure.
The people pleaser.
The charming Lycopodium.
They learn very early on to curry favor. They act as a mirror.
Copying your mannerisms.
Agreeing with your opinions and bending over backwards to avoid confrontation.
Your notes point to car salesmen as a prime example of this energy.
They cultivate a smooth, personal touch, blending nonchalance with calculated flattery.
The underlying motivation here is pure opportunism.
The people pleaser desires peace and popularity because, to them, popularity equals safety.
They will readily step into the role of diplomatic peacemaker, not out of any deep moral calling or genuine empathy.
No, but because conflict in their vicinity threatens their own security.
You see it in game show hosts who project that nauseatingly fake intimacy, greeting contestants like lifelong best friends.
The notes even reference the innkeeper character from the musical Les Miserables.
Master of the house.
Yes. He welcomes guests with open arms and a joyful song, all while watering down the wine and picking their pockets.
It is the weaponization of charm to get away with bad behavior.
Which naturally brings us to how this archetype navigates genuine, close relationships.
If an individual's entire personality is a defense mechanism, true emotional intimacy becomes incredibly difficult.
The Lycopodium remains emotionally detached. In many ways, they never truly mature in that regard.
They often seek a mother figure in a partner rather than a challenging equal.
They are looking for someone who will offer unconditional love, manage their daily lives, and tolerate their boyish charm without demanding too much heavy emotional lifting in return.
To illustrate that specific brand of detachment, the texts utilize a remarkable metaphor.
I thought this was brilliant.
The Lycopodium is described as having a strong preference for company in the next room.
Company in the next room.
Yeah.
That feels like the psychological equivalent of parallel play in toddlers.
Yes.
They want the presence without the interaction.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly captures their tension between the human need for attachment and their paralyzing fear of enmeshment.
Right.
If they're completely alone in a house, they feel lonely and insecure.
But if their partner is sitting right next to them on the couch, attempting to engage in a deep emotional dialogue,
They feel suffocated.
they require the safety net of knowing someone is there, literally in the next room, without the pressure of having to actively engage in vulnerable intimacy.
And that emotional distance, while detrimental to a marriage, actually becomes a superpower in certain careers.
Lycopodiums often excel as scientists, engineers, or computer programmers.
They thrive in environments where logical, rational thought is prized and emotional vulnerability is irrelevant.
It provides them with a profound sense of control.
In a laboratory or when analyzing lines of code, the rules are rigid and predictable.
There's no messy emotional unpredictability to navigate.
They can slowly climb the corporate ladder, relying on their competence and their easygoing charm with coworkers.
Entirely bypassing the terrifying chaos of deep interpersonal relationships.
Yet they aren't entirely devoid of feeling.
No, they possess a surprisingly soft center.
A Lycopodium man might weep easily at a wedding or when publicly thanked.
And as fathers, they are usually very easygoing. They enjoy playing sports or video games with their children, adopting the role of a buddy rather than an authority figure.
However, that buddy dynamic is frequently just another avoidance strategy.
By playing the fun friend, they abdicate the difficult, confrontational aspects of parenting.
Leaving the actual discipline to their partner.
The notes make a direct comparison to Homer Simpson.
Such a good comparison.
He coasts along, avoids the hard emotional labor, hangs out with his friends, but genuinely loves his family in a gentle, albeit highly passive manner.
Now let's transition to how this internal psychological state maps onto the physical body.
Because a core tenet of this typing system is that the physical appearance often mirrors the internal energy.
The body is essentially keeping score of all that anxiety.
The classic Lycopodium physique is incredibly distinct. They are typically medium tall and skinny, often presenting with a puny or stoop-shouldered build and a sunken chest.
It perfectly physicalizes that internal feeling of lacking power.
You will often see a deeply wrinkled brow, which is the physical scar of years spent in a state of chronic anticipatory anxiety.
They also tend to have thinning, straight hair, and there's a fascinating irony to their physical timeline.
As infants, Lycopodiums are often described as looking remarkably like little old men with wise, wrinkled faces.
But to compensate for their lack of physical bulk and to project a more traditionally virile image, adult Lycopodium men will frequently grow a beard.
Specifically a goatee.
Yes, a goatee.
We have focused heavily on male examples, as this is predominantly a male archetype.
Right.
But approximately 10% of Lycopodium cases are female. How does that core wound of impotence manifest differently under societal expectations for women?
The underlying fear of failure is identical, but the societal expectations shape the mask differently.
Makes sense.
A female Lycopodium is often incredibly timid, acquiescent, and constantly striving to please everyone around her.
She harbors a deep-seated fear of being an inadequate wife, a failing mother, or falling short in her career.
But just like the male strutter who hits the gym to project dominance, some Lycopodium women swing to the absolute opposite extreme.
They conceal their crippling anxiety behind intense physical fitness.
They become hardcore bodybuilders or gym instructors, constructing a literal armor of muscle.
So nobody can see the frightened, insecure individual hiding beneath it.
That perfectly underscores how the archetype is defined by the core wound, not just the surface behavior.
To contextualize this even further, the additional case studies you provided offer a brilliant contrast by introducing another archetype called Staphysagria.
This was one of the most compelling case studies in the stack.
How does the Staphysagria differ from the Lycopodium when faced with similar pressures?
It illustrates how the exact same childhood pressure cooker can splinter into completely different coping mechanisms.
Right.
Like the Lycopodium, a Staphysagria child often faces intense, crushing pressure and demands for perfection from their parents.
But while the Lycopodium develops anticipatory anxiety and tries to compensate with bravado, charm, or intellectualism,
the Staphysagria suppresses their emotions entirely.
they push their anger and fear so deep into their subconscious that it manifests as severe physical illness.
The case study details an 18-year-old student, highly intelligent, polite, and charming,
Who suddenly developed crippling, generalized arthritis right after taking his final exams.
When the practitioner dug into his history, it was revealed that his parents were relentlessly forcing him to go to law school.
And he was absolutely terrified he had failed his exams.
He was a classic Staphysagria. He felt entirely incapable of expressing his anger toward his parents.
And he could not consciously face the anxiety of failing their expectations.
So his subconscious mind intervened and created a debilitating physical condition.
As he articulated during the consultation, the arthritis made him feel like, quote, I can't do anything.
His brain chose physical paralysis over emotional confrontation because the illness provided a built-in, undeniable physical alibi for the failure he was anticipating.
It is staggering to think about the mind-body connection in those terms.
It really is.
The Lycopodium struts around and brags to hide the fear, while the Staphysagria literally paralyzes his own body to avoid confronting it.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most poignant stage of the Lycopodium's life.
Old age.
What happens to that meticulously constructed mass when cognitive decline sets in?
When dementia or senility takes hold, the cognitive load required to maintain that sophisticated facade becomes too heavy,
The walls come down?
and what remains is an unfiltered exaggeration of their underlying traits.
Because they no longer possess the mental energy to sustain their charm or their intellectual smokescreens, they become incredibly dictatorial and cantankerous.
It sounds as if they're finally fighting all those interpersonal battles they spent their entire lives avoiding.
The clinical observations describe them in nursing homes having absolute fits.
Swearing, kicking, and taking huge offense at imagined slights.
Furthermore, their memory for names, which was likely never strong due to their self-absorption, completely vanishes.
They resort to referring to everyone generically as woes his name.
And the opportunism and the desperate desire for affection also take a comical yet tragic turn.
Senile Lycopodium men are notorious in these clinical settings for highly inappropriate, very obvious flirting with the nurses.
The boyish charm they once used to convince women to mother them in their 20s devolves into a highly exaggerated, unfiltered behavior in their 80s.
So what does this all mean?
It's a great question.
For you, the listener, taking the time to absorb these frameworks gives you an entirely new lens for viewing the dynamics of the people around you.
Absolutely.
The next time you find yourself in a meeting or at a dinner party and you encounter someone who is overly pompous, using $10 words to sound authoritative, or someone who is incredibly charming but clearly keeping you at arm's length,
Take a closer look.
you might not be looking at an arrogant person at all. You might be looking at a Lycopodium.
A highly sophisticated shield engineered decades ago to protect a deeply frightened child who is still convinced they are going to fail.
It profoundly alters how you interact with people when you recognize the fear driving the bravado.
And this raises an important question, something for you to mull over long after we wrap up today's analysis.
Let's hear it.
We have seen how the Lycopodium constructs their entire personality, their ambition, their charm, their intellectualism.
Purely as a defense mechanism to avoid the pain of failure.
So what happens to an individual like this if they actually achieve absolute, undeniable, unconditional success?
Wow.
If the threat of failure is permanently removed from their life, does the mask finally come off? Or, after a lifetime of wearing it to survive, has the mask simply become the face?
That is a haunting and fascinating thought to leave on. Thank you for sharing these incredibly insightful sources with us and for taking this journey into the architecture of the human mind. Until next time, keep digging deeper.